Interview questions, which is the next thing you guys all want to know. There are two basic kinds of interview questions. One are general interview questions. There are things like, tell me about your strengths and weaknesses. Tell me about what you excel at or have excelled at. Tell me about some of your leadership experiences. Those are some general interview questions. The second kind of question you're going to get are behavioral based. They're not just the general, but they're related to a specific time or place or action or behavior that you've taken. So they often say, tell us about a time when. Tell us about a time when you failed at something. Tell us about a time when you were selected out of a group for something that you did. Tell us about a time when you struggled with ethics in a situation. Those would be some examples. For either one of these, I would really encourage you to use the STAR approach. So for all of them, whenever they ask you any kind of a question, whether that be general or specific, think about a time or an experience or task that you did. Think about the actions that you took as the A. And finally, think about the results. If the results are positive in that example that you give, you're done with the answer. If it was negative, you need to follow that up with what you learned out of the experience, how you grew, what you would do differently next time. Here's an example. I had a student who wanted to work for Arvest, and so he went and actually interviewed for a teller position. He worked at another institution, not JBU, but another one before or previously. And in the middle of the interview, the interviewer said, tell me about a time when you failed at doing something. And to which he thought about it for a moment, and he thought, when have I failed? Yeah, I was at an institution. It wasn't JBU. I won't say who it was. I was working in the cashier's window. At the end of the day, we went to close our drawers out, and I was missing $3,000. And my boss came in, yelled at me, and that definitely was a time that I failed. And that's where he left his answer. So he didn't get the job, obviously, and he came back in and we started talking about it, and he said, well, we started talking about his answers, and he told me that experience or what he had said around that. I said, well, did you learn from it? Like, did you get fired? He said, well, no. In fact, my boss and I figured out that it was really an accounting mistake, and we were able to put some procedures in place to make sure it didn't happen again. We ended up finding the $3,000 later on down the road. And I said, well, did you tell the employer? And he said, well, no, the employer wanted me to tell them about a time that I failed, so I told them when I failed. So make sure, if you have to disclose anything negatively about you, a time when you failed, when they say, tell us about your weaknesses, make sure that you do say those things, be very honest about them, but think about how you grew, what are you doing to become better about those things, how are you trying to make them less of a weakness, and you really need to follow it up with those other answers. Tips. Show, don't tell. Anytime you can tell a story, it captivates. You guys know this as well as I do, that when you are sitting in a lecture with your professors, the way the professors connect with you on a personal level is telling you a good story about whatever it is they're talking about. The same is true in an interview. In fact, I've tried to share several stories with you, not just to take up time, but the reality is that it communicates so much more effectively if you can put things in the context of a narrative. So please show, don't tell. Practice being self-positive. At JBU, we tend to have this modesty cap that we put on, saying that if we are Christians and we're doing what Christ has called us as Christ followers, that we need to be very humble. I wholeheartedly agree with that. However, in an interview, you are in competition. This is a time to take off the modesty cap and to really celebrate what it is that God has done through you and for you. This is your chance to let the light shine, to be able to say, again, it's not all about you, but the more that you're able to share that and to be excited about the things that you've done, your accomplishments, the successes that you've had in life, you're celebrating God in those instances and you're bringing Him the glory. You don't have to always say that in an interview, well, it was me, but really it was God working through me. But just you celebrating those things for an interviewer is part of that process. And I would challenge you to, again, take off that modesty cap and really celebrate what it is that God's done through you as you answer those questions. Be succinct with your answers. Again, you want to get to the point, get in, get out. You don't want to put them to sleep. Think about your response before you respond. If they ask you something and it totally catches you off guard, please take a moment to say, wow, that's a great question. Can I have a moment to think about it? And when you do, you're going to say, wow, there's a really loud noise. There's something going on over there next door. I wonder if they're talking about me. I mean, I am the new guy right now. Wonder what those other folks are talking about. Sounds like a really interesting topic about accounting, and I'm an accounting major, and that sounds really fun to get involved in. I think I might know their answer. Don't take the bait. The reality is, as soon as you ask for that pause and you break, number one, it's going to be a little bit of an awkward silence, but don't take the bait of thinking about all the other things. Think about an answer. That's why you asked for the time. And the time is going to end, and you're going to have a good response. So actually, in that time, in that moment, in that pause, don't get distracted. Make sure you're formulating your answer. Take notes. Again, in that legal pad, thinking about the benefits, thinking about the things that you're doing in the company. You don't have to write everything down in the interview. In fact, I'd encourage you to kind of make an outline out of what you receive or information you get. Then when you get out and you're in your car, fill in all the notes and the things in between those lines. Don't answer illegal questions. Things about age, marital status, sexual orientation, gender, and race are all illegal topics for the employer to ask you about, unless it has something to do with the function of the job. So at JBU, when we interview RDs, we ask them all about their families, we ask them about their religion, we ask them about other things, because they're actually going to be living on campus with their spouse if they're married. But in a real employment situation outside of JV or outside of a live-in situation, they can't ask you those things. If you're a young female, sometimes they'll ask, so what are your family plans? They can't ask those questions. Again, if anything that they could discriminate about hiring you for are illegal questions to ask. Again, if it has to do with you fulfilling your job or fulfilling the duties of your job, those are fair game for you to ask those things. So in essence of that, a response to that, one answer that you might give is, my personal life will not affect my ability to be a very successful and productive employee. Again, you're assuring the employee or employer that whatever it is that they're asking about is not going to have a bearing on how well you do your job. And it's important to kind of keep coming back to that if they keep going down that road. Finally, relax and be yourself. Again, in an interview, 90% of it is about your connection with the employer, and you want to leave a good connection in there. At the end of every interview, if they are a good interviewer, they're going to ask you, do you have any questions for me? The only wrong answer to that is if you say, no, I do not have any questions for you. You need to have 3 or 4 really good questions for them. In a lot of ways, looking at the company is like looking at this iceberg. You see what's outside of the water. In fact, they're going to wine you and dine you. Often they're going to take you to a nice dinner. They're going to show you the best things that the company has to offer. They're going to talk about their wonderful benefits package and why you should work for them. They're going to show you what's outside of the water. Your job as a good interviewee is to figure out what's lurking beneath the surface of that water. What does their culture look like? What does the job look like specifically? And so you need to ask questions around that. Some good questions, maybe, what does teamwork look like here? What do you expect me to accomplish in my first 60 or 90 days? Again, you're able to see, are they going to overwork you and kill you in your first 60 to 90 days, or is that a reasonable expectation? You're also demonstrating to them that you want to be in that high-performing group and that you want to know what that will look like. What are the common attributes of your top performers? Again, this is a great question to ask, and it lets you know, how do you stack up? When they say, man, our top performers work 80 hours a week at least. They take work home with them. They take work on vacation with them. They don't really have families, and that's to their benefit to not do that because they are fully dedicated to us. Hopefully you never hear that answer. But again, those are the things you're looking for. What is that culture that you don't see from all the paperwork and the things that you've read about the company and research so far? What are a few things that really drive the results of the company? Again, being able to understand what they value and hold in high regard. Do most employees count down the days to the weekend, or are they looking for Monday to come around? Again, if you have a shot to talk with another employee, or they bring you in to talk with someone else who's been working there for a while, ask them, are you excited to come to work on Monday morning, or do you dread when Monday morning comes around? And often they'll give you a good reflection of that. And finally, what do you see as the biggest challenge facing XYZ company right now? Again, from their perspective, what is that challenge? Oh man, we're looking at downsizing. I mean, we're going to hire you on, but we don't have a good financial outlook in the next several months. Hopefully that's a good red flag for you at that point. But unless you ask the questions, they're not going to automatically offer you that information.